Good afternoon. This is Kurt Beckett, Chair of the Energy Facility Site Evaluation Council, calling our June 17th regular meeting to order. It is 1:31 p.m. And Ms. Barker, if you would call the roll, please.
Certainly. Department of Commerce.
Present.
Department of Ecology.
Blake Nelson. Present.
Department of Fish and Wildlife. Department of Natural Resources. Utilities and Transportation Commission.
This is Brian Rybaric, present.
Local government and optional state agencies for the Hop Hill Project, Benton County. For the Wallula Gap Project, Benton County. For the GoldenEye Best Project. Yes.
Adam File noted his presence. He was having a mic issue, so.
Yes, thank you, Chair. For the GoldenEye Best Project, Skagit County. For the Cascade Renewable Transmission Project, Skamania County.
Present.
City of Stevenson.
Jeff Breckel, present.
City of North Bonneville. Klickitat County.
Jan Sokol, present.
City of Camas. Clark County. Assistant Attorney Generals, John Thompson.
Present.
Zach Packer. Talia Tuitt.
Present.
For FSEC staff, I will call those anticipated to speak today. Dave Walker.
Present.
Amy Hofkemeyer.
Present.
Amy Moon.
Amy Moon, present.
Sarah Randolph.
Present.
John Barnes.
John Barnes is here.
Joanne Snarsky.
Present.
Maria Belkina.
Present.
Lisa McLean.
Good.
For operational updates, I will only be calling those who have a non-routine update. Columbia Generating Station.
Kelly Elsafagan, present.
Columbia Solar. Austria Solar.
Present.
This is John Volts, Roastery Solar, present.
Is there anyone online for the Council for the Environment?
Yes, Sarah Reineveld and Yuri Coral are present.
Chair, there is a quorum for all councils.
Thank you very much. Let me make just a couple quick announcements and then we will take up the agenda for adoption. First of all, for all participants today, and especially members of the public, we are remote, all of us. And if you have your hand raised, especially council members, I will do my best to find you on one of my two screens here, or other staff I'm sure will assist. But when in doubt, speak up if you haven't been called upon. So thanks for that. Also, I have the honor of introducing Aaron Peterson, our new Commerce permanent council member. He is a senior energy policy specialist with the Department of Commerce. And with that, I was going to call on Council Peterson to say a word of introduction, and also let me say thanks on behalf of all of FSEC and the council. Thanks for some of the onboarding time you've spent here in recent couple weeks. So with that, over to you, Council Peterson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My name is Aaron Peterson. I live in Ellensburg. I've been with the Department of Commerce Energy Policy Office for 4 years, hired by Glenn Blackman. That office is now run by Nora Hawkins. I work on agriculture and rural energy policy, primarily some of the siting and permitting projects, a little bit of the tax policy surrounding county receipts, and distributed energy resources, the smaller projects and different interconnections related to those. I came out to Washington and Northwest from a farm in Southwest Minnesota in the 1990s. I've also worked in Washington on salmon recovery efforts, habitat projects, 2019, 2018. I ran an environmental NGO in Northwest Montana, focused on grizzly bear recovery, and I've got about 10 years experience as a wind and solar developer in the private sector, primarily across the Great Plains, upper Midwest. And a long time ago, I'm a former state representative from Southwest Minnesota and served for 6 years. Prior to that, 2 years on Capitol Hill in DC, working on the 2002 Farm Bill, conservation title, and also International Trade Commission on steel trade tariffs and such that are still in the news today. My undergraduate is from Colorado State University in geology and watershed science, and I got a master's degree from the Evans School at UW. So looking forward to contributing, serving, and listening and learning. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Council Peterson, and we'll welcome your breadth and depth of experience. I'm sure plenty of places it will apply, so welcome. With that, Chair would entertain a motion to adopt the proposed agenda, and we can take any amendments up once we have the agenda on the table. Is there so motion?
This is Brian Ryberick. I will so move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Councilman Nelson, second.
Thank you. The agenda motion has been moved and seconded. I do not know of any changes today. Are there any other comments council members wish to make? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting the agenda as proposed, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Okay. We have our proposed agenda. Let me please note, especially for the benefit of any members of the public who may be participating here today, you'll see at the bottom of the regular agenda, there is a note that there are 2 informational public hearings for an amendment request for change of ownership for 2 projects, one for Columbia Solar and one for Goose Prairie Solar. So we will take probably a short 10-minute break at the end of the regular council meeting and move over into those public information hearings immediately to follow conclusion of this regular council meeting. So I think that is it on my additional comments I want to make about what was coming here. Oh, I'm sorry. And that today, council, per our discussion last month, you will see an outside briefing at the tail end of this meeting, the Resource Adequacy and Pacific Northwest Energy Transition Study with members of the Public Generating Pool and the consulting firm E3. So we will focus on that larger study. Some of you are painfully familiar. Councilor Ryberick, you may be one who represents that. So thanks for allowing us to help continue to put the message out on some of the demands and challenges we face as a region. A reminder, we have a similar briefing in December that was focused on shrub step habitat updated guidelines. It's probably a little closer into more of the permitting lane than resource adequacy, but ultimately they are certainly all interrelated. So appreciate everyone's support for that. Relatedly, I will try to move us through this agenda, including minimizing my own comments, so that we can complete this on time, including with the outside discussion, and then move into our additional hearings immediately to follow. So with that, let's move to minutes. Is there a motion to approve the May 20 regular meeting, monthly meeting minutes? Chair would entertain said motion.
This is Brian Ryberick. I will move approval of the minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
They said I second.
Thank you. The minutes have been moved and seconded. I did not have any specific changes to make this month other than learning how to speak more clearly as a chair. Were there any other changes from other council members? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the minutes are adopted. We will then move into our project updates, starting with Badger Mountain, and Joanne Snarski of the FSEC staff will provide the update.
Chair, this
Sure.
is Andrea Grantham. I think you might be referencing an older agenda. We made it to where Columbia Generating Station was the start.
And we'll see that. Then we will. Sure, I'm looking evidently at the right agenda we just approved. Yes, Columbia Generating Station, and Kelly Elsathagan will make the presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair Beckett, FSEC council members and staff. Can you all hear me okay?
We can.
Yes.
Okay. I'm providing the update for Columbia Generating Station. We have two non-routine updates that we'd like to provide. The first update is to the August 15th, 2025 oil loss event. Energy Northwest recently submitted a follow-up report on the TOHX2 Delta heat exchanger oil loss event originally reported to FSEC on August 15th, 2025 in accordance with the Columbia Generating Station National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. A summary of the event will follow. On August 15, 2025, Columbia Generating Station immediately secured circulating water blowdown to the Columbia River after observing a potential oil sheen in one of our cooling towers, and we promptly notified the Washington State Department of Ecology, FSEC, and the National Response Center. Graymar Environmental, a contractor specializing in emergency spill response, mobilized that evening to support inspections along with Ecology's spill program. Inspection by Energy Northwest, Graymar, and Ecology found no visible oil sheen in the Columbia River, the circulating water cooling towers, or the circulating water basin. Graymar personnel assessed that the apparent sheen was most likely biological growth rather than oil. Water samples collected from several locations showed fats, oil, and grease concentrations below the laboratory detection limit of 5 milligrams per liter. A leaking heat exchanger was removed from service on August 17th, 2025. That was the TOHX2 Delta. After confirming water quality and the absence of sheen, the circulating water blowdown was restored on August 18th, 2025. And the update is that an engineering evaluation independently reviewed by MPR Associates determined that approximately 380 to 463 gallons of non-hazardous oil were released between May 31st and August 17th, 2025. The heat exchanger failure allowed oil to migrate into the plant service water system and discharge through the circulating water system to the Columbia River via outfall 001. Throughout the event, both laboratory verified and calculated oil concentrations in circulating water remained below the laboratory detection limit. The failed heat exchanger has been removed from service and will be inspected during the next refueling and maintenance outage in spring of 2027 to confirm the root cause and define additional corrective actions. Energy Northwest has since strengthened spill prevention awareness, enhanced monitoring and trend analysis, and increased inspection frequency to ensure early detection and prevention of similar mechanical failures. All available data indicate that the discharge remained below detection limits, and Energy Northwest has put in place corrective and preventative actions to avoid recurrence. We had another oil loss event February 15th of 2026 that was just reported in May. On February 15th, 2026, during startup following a manual plant shutdown, an unexpected oil-water mixture was observed while venting the plant service water side of turbine oil heat exchanger TOHX2 alpha. Upon discovery, TOHX2 alpha was promptly removed from service, and backup heat exchanger TOHX2 Bravo was placed in service to prevent further potential oil leakage. The observation indicated a potential intrusion of reactor feed water turbine alpha turbine oil into the plant service water system with migration into the circulating water system and potentially the Columbia River via outfall 001. The maximum estimated release rate is 5.79 gallons of non-hazardous oil. Circulating water samples taken on February 21st and 23rd of 2026 were analyzed for fats, oil, and grease and were below detection limits. Energy Northwest promptly began an investigation to confirm the source of the observed oil, but the required detailed engineering review and system inspections resulted in a protracted timeline to agency notification. Energy Northwest completed telephone notifications to Ecology, FSEC, and the National Response Center on May 27, 2026, and submitted a written report to FSEC the same day. Strengthened environmental protections implemented after the August 15, 2025 oil loss event, including enhanced spill prevention awareness and improved monitoring for early detection of oil and water conditions, enabled faster recognition, quicker isolation, and a coordinated response that reduced the potential severity of the event. As with TOHX2 Delta, the TOHX2 Alpha heat exchanger will be inspected during the upcoming refueling and maintenance outage in spring of 2027 to confirm whether a leak was present and determine any additional corrective or preventative actions. Does anyone have any questions?
Council members,
Mr.
I
Chair,
know
if
we've
I
been
might.
briefed on this previously, and so with that in mind, by all means, comments or questions. Councilor Barrett.
Yeah, just really quick comment and really just underscoring the last point. Kelly, thank you for the update. And what struck me in the written update was a couple numbers, the 380 to 463 gallons. And I appreciate the lab tests show that that's still below the levels. But when we get to the second event, 5.79 gallons is the maximum amount. I just want to underscore the value of the process improvement that was put in place. It seems like it did exactly as it was designed, to catch things earlier and to identify issues faster. So just want to underscore the value of that and appreciate the update.
Thank you.
Appreciate the comment. Other council members? Okay. Thank you very much for the update.
Thank you.
We will then move on to Columbia Solar. And Sarah Randolph will provide the update.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Beckett, council members and staff. For the record, this is Sarah Randolph, Site Specialist for Columbia Solar. The regular facility update is provided in your packet, and there was nothing non-routine to report. As mentioned at the May council meeting, Columbia Solar submitted a request for transfer of ownership pursuant to WAC 46366. Given the administrative nature of this amendment request, staff are holding an informational hearing required by WAC 463-66030 immediately following the regular June council meeting today at 3:30. The documents can be found on the FSEC website for anyone who wishes to review and comment. The next opportunity for comment, there will be red lines and an order capturing the council's decision. Following the informational meeting and review of comments received, staff will prepare the necessary documentation to support the council's action on the request, which will be posted for public comment prior to council vote on the request. We anticipate requesting the council to take up the decision in the July council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments or questions from council? Okay, hearing none and knowing we will also take it up in more detail in the hearing after the regular meeting. We will then move on to the Austria Solar update. I believe John Volz is with us to provide the update.
Good afternoon, Chair Beckett, council members and staff. This is John Volz with Cypress Creek, representing the Austria Solar facility. In the month of May, the aerial and field infrared scanning was complete. Our performance testing, consisting of availability and capacity testing, was successfully completed. The operation maintenance facility was near completion, with only water and septic connections remaining to be completed. Demobilization of major construction equipment is ongoing, and continued remediation of BMP findings took place. There are two additional items to note that occurred in the period. The first, on May 28th, there was a thermal event discovered within the arrays around 2:30 p.m. The single representative from the project was on site, identified the smoke and the fire, called the local authorities, and relocated to a safe distance. Emergency services arrived 3:15. The fire was fully extinguished by 5:40. There were no injuries that had occurred. At the time of this report, the initial investigation was ongoing, but the findings have been finalized at this time. Cause of the brush fire was that a portion of the tracker assembly was not successfully connected to the pile and became dislodged. The sag pinched one of the messenger cables, exposing conductor. The source of the fire is a spark from the conductor that fell into the brush below and started the fire. The impact was about 6 blocks of the facility. I believe it was around 40 acres, but there was actually very little damage to any of the facility equipment. The impacted portions were powered down and remained offline until the investigation was complete. At this time, the facility is back up and running, except for the single row that has been identified as being impacted. And so back up to nameplate generation, but the damage to the equipment is extremely minimal. One solar module and a row of the messenger cable. That installation or replacement will be complete by the end of this week. A very, very big shout out to the Yakima County Fire District 4 for their prompt response and containment and extinguishing of the fire. Very grateful that nothing more significant occurred. Final comment, as we move towards operation, I will be transitioning out of this role and Jennifer Heyer will be taking over. Those are the updates for the May report for the Austria Solar Facility. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Councilor Barrick.
Yeah, John, thanks for the update. Obviously, going through the packet here and getting ready for the meeting, this was one that struck a chord, and just I want to echo the thanks for all of the response team, and wildfire issues are obviously front of mind for all of us right now, or brush fires, whatever they are. Just a couple quick questions. One, I keep asking, and I think what you just said is that the site is fully operational with the exception of these components. Is that, am I hearing that correctly? That with the pictures here, it looked like the potential damage was much worse, but it sounds like it's not as bad as the pictures might suggest, and it is fully operational and commercially operational at this time?
So it is the facility is generating up to the nameplate capacity. Since it is over-designed, the outage that is taken due to the very limited impact does not reduce the generation.
Okay.
And so, yes, the Bonneville Power Administration has authorized us to commercially operate. We've been doing so, I think, since April, but there are still some remaining items that occur until we formally transition into the construction stage. I agree that the picture looks pretty significant, but somehow the fire stayed primarily low to the ground. And so a complete inspection of the entire impacted area was performed. The remainder of the facility was inspected to make sure that the cause of the thermal event is not repeated anywhere else in the facility. And so very, very fortunate, but yes, very, very minimal damage to the equipment and especially to any personnel. Nothing to any physical damage or representative from either our site representative or any of the first responders.
Yeah, I mean, that's bottom line is nobody was hurt, and that's critical. And I think you just answered what was my second question, which was in the report it says that the tracker assemblies will all be visually inspected. It sounds like that inspection has occurred prior to going back to full generation.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from council? Then I would just add, and thank you, that was my question also, Councilor Barrick, and thanks, John, for speaking to it. I guess I would just flag a reminder, if there are any panels that are due to be replaced, there is a general awareness and interest on what happens to the old panels in terms of their disposal. So I would flag that for staff and Cypress Creek that I'm sure there is an answer to. If there's one now, that's great. If not, happy to stay tuned. So anything else for you, Mr. Volz?
No, for the last comment, typically the panels are recycled. However, the one panel that was damaged had some considerable burns on it. And so I believe it will be standard disposal, but I will note that in the report for the next month, what occurs there.
That'd be great. I appreciate it. Just given, the larger public awareness and interest in the example. So with that, thank you again, and we will move on to Badger Mountain, and Joanne Snarski of FSEC staff will provide the update.
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you, Chair Beckett and council members. For the record, this is Joanne Snarski, the siting specialist for the proposed Badger Mountain project in Douglas County. In April of 2025, Avangrid, the developer for Badger Mountain project, requested FSEC place the project on hold by pausing all activities on the project. The council voted to allow a 3-month extension with a request that the applicant provide more information on the purpose for an extension and more specific timeframe for their request. In July, Avangrid requested an additional 12-month pause on the project activities. At that time, they cited issues with site control, regulatory uncertainty, tax changes, and supply chain that were impacting their decisions on the project. We notified them early this month of the pending expiration in July of the current extension. Next month, we anticipate that an action may be presented to the council on this issue. As of now, I have not received any notification of their intended request for this project, but we just wanted to make you aware of what was coming here in the future. May I answer any questions?
Thank you, Joanne and Ms. Snarski. And yes, the August date did catch my eye as I was looking at the update, knowing it's been there for a little bit in terms of the date that would expire. I would just encourage, again, additional depth of context and knowledge for any future extension requests, which certainly we will take up objectively. Obviously, there are others who have strong opinions about things like extensions. So with that, let me ask if there are other comments or questions from council members. Okay. Seeing none, we will then move on to Carriger Solar, and I believe Ms. Snarski, you will provide that update as well.
Yes, thank you. Again, for the record, this is Joanne Snarski, the siting specialist for Carriger Solar in Klickitat County. The process of current judicial review of this project with the Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakima Nation is moving forward. I will defer to John Thompson for any legal updates on this case, however. Also, FSEC staff are continuing to discuss Carriger's timing for submitting the construction plans required in the site certification agreement. A few of the draft plans are anticipated to be submitted by the end of this month. May I answer any questions?
I think my question would be if Council Thompson had any other, even minor update on the status of the legal case, that would be helpful. And then we can turn to other council members.
Yes, Chair Beckett. There's been a bit of a development in the process of getting the record transferred to the Thurston County Superior Court, in that the developer and the Yakima Nation have indicated that they want to have a stay of the proceeding while they pursue settlement discussions. So that's likely to happen within the next few days for that request to be submitted to the court.
Very well. Appreciate the update, knowing it is ongoing litigation. Were there other questions or comments from council members? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the Cascade Renewable Transmission Project. Maria Belkina will provide our update.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Beckett and council members. For the record, my name is Maria Belkina, siting specialists assigned to the Cascade Renewable Transmission Project. Since the last council update, FSEC conducted both a tribal SIPA scoping meeting and a public SIPA scoping meeting on May 27th. Following those meetings, the SIPA scoping comment period officially closed on June 1st. Staff are currently reviewing and organizing comments receiving during the scoping process and preparing the SIPA scoping report to support development of the environmental impact statement. During the scoping period, FSEC received a total of 46 comments. The comments have been posted to the project website and the console SharePoint. FSEC has also continued its review of the applicant's responses to the first data request. The responses and supporting materials have been published to the project website. Staff are reaching out to the local jurisdictions to seek additional input on the updated land use information. Staff continue to coordinate with state and federal agencies regarding environmental review responsibilities and alignment between the SIPA and NEPA processes. Coordination is ongoing with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Oregon agencies, tribal governments, and other cooperating and reviewing agencies. In addition, FSEC is coordinated with agencies and the applicant regarding upcoming aquatic resource mitigation plan workshop. We are also planning a field review with ecology of the upland portion of the proposed project corridor later this month. That concludes my update. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Council members, are there questions for staff on Cascade Renewable? Council Leckey.
Yeah, Asa Leckey, Scuderia County. Is there an update on the government-to-government meeting for the tribes? Thank you.
We did one government-to-government consultation with Cold Stripe, and we have scheduled on July 7th consultation with Yakima tribe, and later this month another one is Grand Throne, I think. Yes, and we're working on that. Amy?
And are the council members invited to that?
I think Amy and Lisa, they can provide more information about that because Lisa is responsible for that.
Yeah, if I could chime in here, please. This is Amy Hofgemeyer for the record. And the council is invited to the scheduled consultation, government-to-government consultation with the Yakama Nation. We will be reaching out shortly with scheduling details to coordinate logistics with all council members, both standing council and project council.
Thank you.
And in this case, Council Leckey, it's again kind of on display the emerging pattern and practice that may emerge around consultation. And thank you all as local representatives for your interest in, and I believe general participation in the Yakima consultation. That will be a first of its kind in terms of the full council of FSEC meeting with the Yakima Council. In this case, the Grand Ronde have asked for consultation, but are using the underlying statute, which is with the chair rather than the chair and the full council. So it's more of an opt-in provision. So if council members have greater interest in certain tribal conversations, I'm certainly happy to, learn of your interests or areas of interest in that regard. In this instance, I think we're doing our best to try and reflect what each tribe is asking for. But ultimately, this is a first of its kind evolution, I think, both on a corridor project like this, as well as in the tribal consultation work also. Other comments or questions for staff?
No, Chair, thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, then we will then move on to the Horse Heaven project update. Amy Moon of FSEC staff will provide the update.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council Chair Beckett and FSEC council members. Over the past few months, staff completed reviews and approvals for several mitigation measures, building on our previous updates to the council. Some of the mitigation plan reviews were precursors to formal plan submittals required 180 and 90 days prior to construction, or at least 180 and at least 90 days prior to construction, per the site certification agreement. The required formal plan submittals due prior to construction are the HAB 6 project layout and design, which is required at least that 180 days prior to construction, and 3 remaining formal plan submittals are required at least 90 days prior to construction. These 3 plan submittals are the Habitat 2 or HAB 2 canyon crossings with proposed mitigation measures to reduce potential barriers to wildlife movement, the HAB 5 indirect habitat loss management plan to mitigate the loss of habitat function and changes in wildlife behavior, and the Wildlife 8 or Wild 8 establishment of a minimum quarter mile or 0.25 mile turbine buffer zone around all known raptor nests. And then please note a 4th required formal plan review for Habitat 1 wildlife movement corridors was approved by the FSEC Council Director on April 9th. Does the council have any questions?
Members of the council, comments or questions for staff? Not at this time, it seems.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will then move on to the Hop Hill Solar Project, and John Barnes, FSEC staff, will present.
Thank you, Chair Beckett and council members. This is John Barnes, FSEC staff for the Hop Hill application. Staff are continuing to work with the applicant in the submission of updated application materials for the Hop Hill project related to a revised and updated site layout currently in development by the applicant. Are there any questions?
Council members, any questions? Seeing none, we will move on to the GoldenEye BEST project, and Joanne Snarski will provide the update.
Thank you. Again, this is Joanne Snarski, the siting specialist for the proposed GoldenEye battery energy storage facility in Skagit County. Staff are continuing to assess the potential impacts from the proposed project as required by the State Environmental Policy Act. Earlier this month, staff received feedback from the Upper Skagit tribe on our request for feedback on the Cultural Resources Survey. Their response continued to clarify their opposition to the project location. They let us know that they have traditional cultural properties, or TCPs, that will be impacted by the project's location. We will be meeting with the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation and the tribe in the weeks to come to better understand their concerns. May I answer any questions?
Council members, comments or questions for staff on GoldenEye? Seeing and hearing none, we will wrap up our project updates. Oh,
This is Andrea Grantham. Whenever you called GoldenEye, I skipped through Wallula. I'm not sure, Wallula should be on the agenda, but can you double check for that?
I had it written down here, but we will go back to that in just a moment. Let me just make sure we're finished on GoldenEye for everybody. Then, yes, going back to Wallula Gap, John Barnes, if you'd please provide the update.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Chair Beckett and council members. This is John Barnes, FSEC staff for the Wallula Gap application. Staff are continuing to work with the applicant, One Energy, and the Yakima Nation Cultural Resource Program staff regarding impacts identified in the TCP, Traditional Cultural Properties, study and report conducted by the Yakima Nation for this application. Staff are working with the Department of Ecology to determine any project modifications or mitigations that may be needed for this application based on information contained in the Department of Ecology's final wetlands and waters report. Are there any questions?
Council members, questions on Wallula Gap? Hearing none. Now conclude our project updates. And with that, we will move on to our director update, Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Chair Beckett. For the record, Dave Walker, Interim Executive Director with FSEC. Just got a couple of short updates today, and then I'll happily yield my remaining time to the remaining agenda. First of all, I wanted to start with the Executive Director recruitment update. Last month, I was speaking to the fact that we were doing our best to have the next executive director on board by July 1st. Unfortunately, that time frame has slipped a little bit, mostly due to scheduling issues, among a few other things. We are hoping to have that process wrapped up, and the new executive director, if all remains on target, would be starting somewhere around the middle of July, maybe later part of July. Just depending on how long it takes us to get that wrapped up. But we are moving forward. And that's about all I think I have on that one. Any questions before I move on to the other issue?
I would just say thank you for your continued service in the interim role, Mr. Walker. So
Thank you, Chair Beckett.
appreciate everyone's support on the process there, including council.
Yes, absolutely. The other piece that I just wanted to briefly touch on, in the last week or so, we have been getting some emails from the governor's office concerning some possible budget issues that are continuing to come at us. These are things that obviously were discussed during the latest legislative session. But with current events, it's really hard to say at this point how the budget is going to shake out for the remainder of this biennium. We have been asked to start looking at cutting some expenditures, but at this point, there has been no percentage or any other guiding documentation at this point. We are waiting on a couple of key revenue forecasts that should be coming out this month, as well as in forthcoming months leading up to the next legislative session that we'll be keeping a very close eye on. At this point, I would stress again, we don't have any direct direction from OFM at this point, although we are continuing to take a look at our budgets and see where we might be able to bring some savings forward if and when that becomes a reality. So more to come on that, but at the moment, really nothing of substance to share with the council. So, thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate the heads up. Any questions or comments from council members? Okay, then we will move on to our tribal update, and Lisa McLean of FSEC will provide our update.
Afternoon, Chair and council members. For the record, this is Lisa McLean. I'm just here to tell you that today we finalized and distributed our policy statement on consultation and coordination with tribal governments. We are working now on getting that posted to the website. As you will recall, as I briefed several times, we began this process in January. We held a not public meeting. We had a meeting with tribes in late March. We received some written comments both before that meeting and after. And as a result, we have this final document. I want to thank everybody who helped with this. I want to start by thanking, I don't think our colleague from Fish and Wildlife is here, but I'd like to say that this started with the consultation policy that Fish and Wildlife gave to me as an example. And so that was where we began this process. So thanks for sharing that with us in a meeting early in Councilmember Pamplin's tenure. And then I just want to thank all of the different tribes that have who participated in our meeting in March, who wrote to us, and it really gave us some great feedback. I'd also just emphasize, and I'm sure that the chair might want to say something more about this, is we expect this to be a living document. We are open to opening it back up as Goya goes through the implementation of Executive Order 2510. And in particular, they're working on some stuff, state agency travel consultation guidelines. Maybe when they finalize that, we'll see some things that we should be putting into ours that aren't in there right now. Obviously, we will continue to hold meetings with individual tribes and learn from that, get feedback from that. We also have in this policy to have an annual meeting with the tribes to go over what we're doing, what we anticipate doing, and to receive feedback on how we're doing in terms of having an open consultation and coordination process. So that may inform this year, next year, the following year, enhancements to this policy. We will, keep everyone updated as that goes along. But I think that's about it. Just we've worked on this hard, and hopefully it's a beginning and something that we can be proud of. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. McLean. And council members, comments or questions? Council Nelson.
Thank you, Chair Beckett. Thank you, Lisa. Great job. I just want to say this is I read it right before the meeting, and it's very clear. As far as it being a working document, something I might propose the next time there are edits or it's for consideration. I do appreciate this was largely between tribal governments and FSEC. So just as a council member, if we can we go to page 3? You scroll down there. Just want you to show what I looked at. Let's see here. So I guess that'd be the second paragraph, like the really big one there. The as per RCW 8050-060. I was looking at that language, and I understand why it's there. It's ripped right from the House bill and how it got codified. But it says if a quorum of the council attends the consultation meeting, council members are restricted in their ability to deliberate among themselves to offer assurances or commitments to a tribe. And I have some, there's a little, and I think perhaps on the next page, it might reference the Public Meetings Act. Yeah, let's see if it does. Thank you so much. Oh, maybe I'm wrong. I probably am wrong. Let's see. I could have sworn somewhere in there it did mention the Public Meetings Act. At any rate, I always interpreted that language of how we can have the government to government and it not be a public meeting is that we aren't effectively acting as like a quorum. We're not deliberating. We're not doing the things we'd like normally do in a meeting like this. And if that's a shared understanding, I would actually propose that language be strengthened in that paragraph there to basically say something like if a quorum of the council attends the consultation meeting, council members may not deliberate amongst themselves to offer assurances or commitments to a tribe. Then I probably reflect to not, you could say to not violate the Public Records Act or Public Meetings Act or something to that extent. I haven't really word shopped it. There's a level of ambiguity in there right now that I don't think was intentional regarding there's almost a choice, like if there wasn't a quorum that maybe we could then deliberate, if that makes any sense. And it was just based off of the way the law came out. That might be clear as mud, but I would instead of saying restricted, I'd just do like a hard may not, so to make it crystal clear about the rules. And then I probably in the rules document where it says the council member, like our rules, it would be something to the extent of because I think right now it's like a rules document, but it's also like definitions. So I'd probably say, and it says our definition of what a council member is. Maybe that's on page 4. If we could scroll down one, please, just so I can have a reference for what I'm talking about here. Yeah, FSEC council. The council means the Energy Facility Site Evaluation Council created by RCW. I'd suggest when it's revised at some point, adding a sentence stating the FSEC council role if invited to a government to government, which again would be to listen to concerns from the tribe. So that would be my feedback for when it may be opened in the future. And of course, take it or leave it as ever. I leave it in your extremely capable hands.
Appreciate that, Council Nelson. Any comment, Lisa, Ms. McLean?
Oh, I thank you for the comment, and that language, not the way it is, and in the, as you say, equivocated way that it's written. I agree with you. That was not intentional. That language and that important restriction that enables us to meet with and not be subject to the having to have an open public meeting. We can only do that if we do not deliberate if you do not deliberate among yourselves and do not offer any assurances. That's in the law. But so that's why I find it interesting that if you see that as equivocal at all, then yes, you're right. The next time we open this up, we should maybe make that much more, may not, shall not, and make it clear. So I appreciate the suggestion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments, Council? Okay, and Councilor Nelson, thank you. It is an important issue and at times a sensitive one, and so appreciate your focus on that area, knowing it is evolving as I spoke to earlier. So with that, we will then move on to our outside guests who are here to provide an unfair request of an approximate 20-minute presentation of the E3 report. So I apologize in advance as chair for trying to set that as the tentative target. I'm happy to call upon and introduce Mary Winke, the Executive Director of the Public Generating Pool, which is essentially a 9 publicly owned utilities organization, as well as Arnie Olson from Energy Environmental Economics, or E3, where he's a senior partner. And we're honored by you joining us today. It's certainly the council's honor as well to help use this forum as a means to continue to highlight key issues, as well as learn from them. As I noted at the outset of the meeting, people like Chair Rybaric are probably have this memorized by now, but I do think it's important to continue to highlight this and certainly welcome discussion or questions from the council after the presentation. We are shooting for or aiming towards a 3 o'clock conclusion or a little before to allow a quick electronic transition to our other hearings. But ultimately, this is the will of the council. And so if you wish to keep digging in, certainly want to acknowledge that as your choice. We've left this briefing to the tail end in case others do need to depart. I believe we'll have a quorum no matter what here. So with that, let me, I believe, turn this to Ms. Winke and see if you want to kick us off.
Great. Thank you so much, Chair Barrick, and thank you to the council for having us here today. We're very pleased with this opportunity to be able to share the E3 study results. I'm going to try to be very brief. And I've heard this presentation probably more than most, and I learn something new every single time. So it's really there's so much there. So it actually bears repeating. So as Chair Beckett mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of the Public Generating Pool. We are a group of consumer-owned utilities in Washington State with one in Oregon. This study originated kind of following a close call in January of 2024, where the system was kind of strained to its potential limits, and the utilities following that event wanted to have an updated understanding of where the region stood from a resource adequacy perspective. The piece that I just really want to emphasize is really kind of the broad support that this study had kind of across the board in terms of the representative utilities who sponsored the study. Arnie has a list here. Really a lot of diversity there. All of the investor-owned utilities in the Northwest, with the exception of one, and many public utility districts, as well as the Northwest and Intermountain Power Producers Coalition. So really a lot of diverse support, and I think really speaks to the urgency and incredible importance of this issue and of, working together across the utilities, across government agencies, across the stakeholder community in terms of coming up with a viable set of solutions. So with that, I'll stick around if there's time for discussion and happy to answer questions, but Arnie is going to do the bulk of the presentation here.
Okay, yep, thanks, Mary, and thanks to the council for this opportunity to present our technical results.
There's, as Mary said, there's a lot here, so there's way more slides than we'll have a chance to go through. So forgive me if I'm flipping through slides quickly. I want to try to highlight the factors that are the most important to consider from a siting perspective. At a high level, our study is a near-term look at resource adequacy needs and a long-term look at optimal investment plans for the region, and trying to think about how those two might marry up. In particular, what is our near-term need? Are we short or are we long? Do we have a gap, and are we on track to fill it? And if we do have to invest in natural gas generation in the near term, does that set us back on our long-term clean energy goals? We wanted to just have a focus on that question because, we expected that we might find that some investment in new gas was needed, and really wanted to interrogate whether that was a robust finding and how that squares with the region's long-term clean energy goals. So that's kind of the near term, what's the resource adequacy question? And then long term, how do we keep the lights on? How do we meet our clean energy goals in a way that's as affordable as possible? So just to cut to the chase, high level on our findings, we did find a near-term resource adequacy gap. You probably have seen these numbers before by now, of about 9 gigawatts by 2030. And when we started to look at what happened after 2030, we saw that that gap was growing to between 14 and 18 gigawatts by 2035. And just to give you a sense of scale, that 9 gigawatts is about as much power as the state of Oregon consumes. So it's quite a large gap. Caused both by load growth in the near term, but also by retirements of firm generation, of which we've seen several thousand megawatts over the last few years. Just a question there quickly.
I think if Ms. Grantham or Barker could help clarify. In the meantime, if you want to go ahead and proceed, Mr. Olson,
Okay,
we'll come back to the hand raised in a moment.
Okay, I'll keep going. Yeah, just stop me whenever you think it's appropriate. We do find that in the long run, it's possible to achieve the region's clean energy goals reliably and affordably. So I think that's really the good news from the study. And we do that by investing in a portfolio of resources, which includes really a wide variety. The wider, the better. Energy efficiency, wind, solar, geothermal, some battery storage, some new transmission, and some new natural gas generation, which is needed just to meet the resource adequacy needs. And again, we really explored that last finding under a wide range of cases and found that the strategy of building new gas peaking capacity is quite robust, and the odds that the new gas infrastructure that you build becomes stranded are very low on this time frame. And then lastly, there is a need for resources on the west side of the Cascades, which I'll get into. But a lot of the growth that we're seeing, especially from building electrification, occurs on the west side of the Cascades. And so we see a need for some pretty significant new infrastructure. And that can be either generation on the west side of the Cascades or transmission from the east side to bring power from the east side into the western part of the region. But that's a pretty significant new need that we're identifying. Just quickly and at a high level, I want to orient you to the types of reliability events that we're seeing. And this is and the ways in which the Northwest is maybe unique from other regions, which is in our dependence on hydropower. So hydropower is a tremendous asset that provides a lot of low-cost energy. It provides a lot of peaking capacity, a lot of flexible capacity, but it does have variable amounts of energy in the system year over year. On the bottom left, what we're showing is our simulated reliability events as a function of the water years that we're modeling. So the way we do the modeling is we toss a lot of different weather conditions into a bucket, a lot of different hydro conditions, wind, solar conditions, resource outages. We do a Monte Carlo draw and simulate thousands of years to identify the times in which the power supply might be less than the demand. And what we find is that most of those events occur during the hydro years, like the lowest 5 or 6 hydro years. So 2010 was a low hydro year. 2001 was a low hydro year when we had the Enron crisis. In 1992, 3 and 4 were also very low hydro years. And so those are the years in which these loss of load events are showing up. What that means is that when we have the events are a multi-day cold snap that occurs during low hydro conditions where we have an energy deficit, and the events can be very long. So we see simulated events of, many of them longer than a day, some of them 50 hours, even 100 hours, several days in a row, but we just don't have enough energy even to run our powerhouses in the hydro projects at their maximum, much less to use to charge batteries. And so this is a reason why we find that batteries are not as effective as a capacity resource in the Northwest as they are in other regions. And what we really need to solve this problem are resources that can deliver energy over long periods of time during those cold winter events. And so this is where we get into what our accredited capacity is from the different resource types. And we find that firm resources like geothermal, like nuclear, like natural gas or gas with carbon capture and storage are very effective at over 90% of their nameplate, whereas wind solar batteries are more in the 13 to 20% range of nameplate. So you have to build many more megawatts of those resources to get the same amount of effective capacity out of them. And batteries in particular for the whole region are very low, only about 6% of nameplate. Now, we do find that on the west side of the Cascades, batteries can help to address a local need. And we find that for some utilities that don't necessarily have direct access to the hydropower storage that's on the Columbia, there are some local issues in which that batteries can help to address. So this isn't a universal finding, but I want to highlight for the whole region, the batteries as a whole are not very effective. And this chart kind of tries to illustrate the physical effects, the phenomena that lead to this. And when we look at which resources are effective at meeting our resource adequacy needs, what we do is simulate them during events like this. So this was the January 2024 cold snap that occurred over the MLK weekend. This is 7 days worth of electric load. And then the colors, the stripes are the different resource types. The gray at the bottom is thermal generation, the pink are imports, the dark blue is hydro, the light blue is wind. So those are the main 4 resources we had available to us during that event. You can see the first 2 days, January 10th and 11th, load was lower. So all the generation was lower. There was a fair amount of wind on those days leading into the event. On the 3rd day, the load starts to go up dramatically. And at the same time, the wind starts to taper off. And this is very typical that as these big high pressure systems move through an area, they create very cold temperatures. They also lead to lack of air movement across a large area. So they're very much coincident with low wind production. What we see is the hydropower was generating very little during the first 2 days, but they dispatch up dramatically during the last 5 days. And it's the hydropower that's flexing up and down to serve those peak loads during the daytime. So it's very unusual. In every other region, it would be thermal plants that would be operating during the peak hours and then turning down at night. But if you look at the bottom, you can see the thermal plants are running flat out. They're running at nameplate really throughout the time period. And we're actually relying on imports to bring energy into the Northwest and using it to charge the reservoirs. So if you look at the nighttime of the second to last day, you can see the hydropower goes down. And then at the same time, the imports are coming up. So at night, we're turning the rivers down, we're bringing in power, and we're storing that power in the reservoirs and discharging it during the peak hours during the next day. So that just sort of shows you the role that hydropower plays in meeting these peak needs, flexing up and down between day and night, and storing energy in the existing reservoir storage that exists in the Northwest. And again, this was a real event. We see many events like this in our simulated model runs, but this just helps you to understand, I hope, what resources are needed. It's resources that can produce energy throughout this time period. So when we look out over time now, our investment modeling is kind of 2-phase. We have a reliability model and a portfolio model, which does optimal investment planning out over time. So here we're finding the least cost portfolio of resources that minimize both capital costs and operating costs. We're meeting our reliability needs and we're meeting our clean energy targets and doing it in the least cost way. Looking at what electric load growth looks like over that time period, we're seeing a lot of growth now that we really haven't in a generation. We've been for the last really 25 years in a world in which there's very little growth. Even as the population is growing dramatically, the economies have almost doubled during that time period, but electric demand has been very flat. That's really starting to change now, and we're seeing already in the last couple of years a significant increase in electric load. A lot of that's due to new plug loads, electric vehicles. There's an anticipation of a lot of new electric heat pumps. There's air conditioning uptake. And there's a little bit of data center load growth as well. I want to emphasize that this is not a data center study. Over the long run, we're only looking at about 3,000 megawatts of data center load in our modeling. So most of the growth that you see here is from organic economic growth, population growth, but really a lot of it is because of electrification policies that we're assuming will be in place in Washington and Oregon. And here we really tried to make our load growth trajectories as consistent as we could with the Washington and Oregon energy strategy documents, which also, as they look at the economy-wide deep decarbonization pathways, identify building and transportation electrification as key strategies for that. And our load growth trajectory, where in our high load case, we're expecting the size of the power system to just about double, is again also very consistent with what's in the Washington and Oregon energy strategy documents as well. In terms of cost, and we model wind and solar as the lowest cost energy resource from an energy perspective. That's the levelized cost of energy chart on the left. But the system doesn't just need energy, the system also needs capacity. So if you look at the right-hand chart, it's showing the levelized cost of capacity. And here you can see that natural gas is by far the lowest cost resource for providing capacity. So this just gives you a sense of why a portfolio of resources will be needed. A lot of wind and solar is cheaper than gas at providing energy, but it's very ineffective at providing capacity. So we need both energy and capacity in our future power system. And so this is what our model builds out over the 20-year time period to meet that high electrification load growth scenario. And I'm just going to show you here the scenario that meets a 96% carbon reduction target below 1990 levels. So this is a target that's very consistent with, if you were to add up the Washington CETA, the Oregon Clean Energy Bill, and the voluntary targets in all of the other states that all the utilities have adopted, you'd get to about 96% carbon reductions region-wide below 1990 levels. And so to get there at a least cost basis, using existing commercially available technologies, you would build out a lot of wind, a lot of solar, some batteries, and some natural gas generation. So just looking specifically at 2045, we're building 63 gigawatts of wind, 62 gigawatts of solar, 31 gigawatts of batteries, and 24 gigawatts of natural gas generation. So in effect, we're building out a wind fleet that's twice the size of our existing hydro fleet. We're building out a solar fleet that's twice the size of our existing hydro fleet. We're building a battery fleet that's about the size of our existing hydro fleet. And we're building new natural gas generation that's nearly the same size, or 2/3 the size of our existing hydro fleet. And so this is all necessary because, again, we're doubling the demand. We're meeting a lot of that demand with resources that are only, let's say, 10 to 20% effective at meeting the resource adequacy needs. And they only operate at, let's say a 30 to 40% capacity factor. So you're building 3 to 4 times as many megawatts as you need in terms of peaking capacity. So growing the system by 50 gigawatts and building out 150 to 200 gigawatts of new capacity to be able to do that. On the right-hand side now is the actual production from those energy resources. And here you can see that by 2045, the light blue is wind. Wind becomes the largest source of energy in our Northwest regional mix. And solar is second largest, and hydro becomes the third largest source of energy, and the dark blue at 124 terawatt hours per year. The other thing to see on this chart is that even though we're adding natural gas capacity between 2025 and 2045, the actual production is going way down. So it goes up a little bit in 2030 because we're retiring coal resources. We have some growth. We haven't had much chance yet to build too much new wind and solar. But natural gas is always the last resource that you run in terms of economic dispatch because you have to burn fuel to make power, whereas wind and solar have no fuel. They're free to operate. So you'll always operate the wind and solar whenever you can, and you'll run the gas as a last resort. So you can see as you add more and more wind and solar to the system, you're just running the gas less and less. You're running it during concentrated periods, those multi-day cold weather events that I showed you. You'd have a lot of gas running, but most of the year you'd have very little, if any, gas running, and you'd be relying on a system that largely is getting its energy from wind, solar, and hydropower. I'm just going to go in, I think, in the interest of time, to what that sort of means from a siting perspective. Well, maybe I'll pause here just quickly to sort of highlight the headline finding that you can get a long ways on carbon reductions at a relatively low cost, but the last few million tons are going to be very difficult and costly to get out, even with emerging technologies. So this is a chart that shows average electric rates in the region as a function of carbon reductions. The green dot on the far left is our high load case if you had no policy at all. And then as you move to the right, you're making the carbon target more and more stringent, and you can see that you aren't increasing electric rates by very much. So you can get a very long way by reducing carbon at a very low cost. At some point, that cost curve really starts to tilt up and it becomes very, very expensive to continue to decarbonize. And that's just because the resources that you have available at low cost really only produced during certain periods of the year. You're having to add more and more expensive and larger and longer duration battery energy storage to move that energy around, and it just becomes very, very expensive. Now, to do all this, you need a lot of capacity. And so this is a chart that just shows you the build out that's implied to meet these targets. So this shows you for the whole region, it's a 6-state region, how many megawatts of generation capacity has been constructed in the region between 2000 and 2025, and then what would be required beyond that. So historically, we've added, let's say, 1,000 to 3,000 megawatts of capacity per year, usually 2,000 or below. We need to start adding capacity at 2,000 to 3,000 megawatts per year right away. In the 2030s, that grows to 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts per year. And in the 2040s, we're up at over 10,000 megawatts per year by the time we get to the end of our time period. So just to give you a sense of this scale of the build out that's required to meet these targets, it's quite extensive. It requires a lot of investment. We're showing about $11 billion per year of investment needed in the near term, growing to $30 billion per year over time out into the 2040s. Just to give you a sense of scale, the total revenue requirement for the whole sector across the 6-state region is about $28 billion today. So the amount of investment that's required is really tremendous. So this needs to be in order to make this work, this needs to be a good place to invest that amount of money. This just gives you some sense of what just the scale of the build out again, the number of projects and the potential land use implications. We do have a regional model that has region specific wind and solar costs and capacity factors with some estimates of the cost of building transmission from east to west and from Montana into the Northwest and from the east side of the Cascades across to the west side. So there is some, geographic information that went into these build outs. I will say it still is very, very coarse, and this shouldn't be taken as, really representative of exactly what the future might look like. But it is interesting that the model wants to spread the build out around across all of the 6 states. But you remember it was 60 gigawatts of wind, 60 gigawatts of solar. A typical utility scale project is about 200 megawatts. So that's 600 utility scale wind and solar projects over the next 20 years in order to meet the load growth and meet the carbon targets. So that would be, if that were divided evenly, that would be 100 per state. So it's just quite a number of projects that you would need to be prepared to run all the permitting, transmission interconnection, sign the power purchase agreements, financing, et cetera. It's just a pace that we're not used to operating at in the Pacific Northwest. We just really haven't had, really any growth over the last 25 years, much less growth on this scale. Now, other regions can and have done this. This is the type of growth that the Southwest, Arizona Public Service, Salt River Project have been dealing with for a long time. They have teams that do this. They're constantly out looking at sites. They're constantly out talking to their new customers. The siting and permitting is aligned, but it's just, we'll need to, be prepared to do just a lot more work in this region than we have had to in the past. And then just to give you some sense of the amount of land use that requires, it's 120,000 megawatts, 600,000 direct, or 559,000 acres of direct land use, up to over 5 million acres, depending on how you count the space in between the wind turbines of a wind project. And at the highest estimate, that would be 14% of the land area of the state of Washington, which of course is the smallest of the 6 states. So, I can only imagine that, local opposition and land use conflicts will become even a larger issue in the future than they have been in the past. And I know you're all very, very directly familiar with those issues. And then last thing I wanted to just highlight is, this finding about natural gas generation being needed for reliability and how robust that finding is. The 2 bars on the far right here show the build out of at 96% carbon reduction with and without natural gas. So if you don't allow natural gas, remember we were building 63 gigawatts of wind before and 31 gigawatts of battery storage. To reach the same carbon target, you'd have to build another 30 gigawatts of wind. So we're now at 96 gigawatts. And another 140 gigawatts of battery storage. So now we're at 173 gigawatts of battery storage. So because these resources aren't very effective at meeting the resource adequacy needs of the region, you'd have to build a lot of them to replace that 24 gigawatts of natural gas that the model wanted to build. And the rates would go up by nearly 6 cents per kilowatt hour, again, without any consequential environmental benefits, because these scenarios are all meeting this 96% carbon target. And that finding was robust. We looked at different emerging technology cases. We looked at 100% carbon reduction cases. Even in that case, our model was building new natural gas in 2040, only to retire it by 2045. So that's how difficult it is to keep the lights on without that natural gas type of resource. At 100% carbon reductions, what the model likes as a strategy is burning a clean fuel in combustion turbines. Because again, it really only needs them during those winter cold snaps, a few days out of the year. So it doesn't want a very expensive, capital intensive resource like nuclear to meet that need. What it wants is a low capital cost resource. Even if the fuel is very expensive, that's okay because you don't need very much of it. So it really wants a clean fuel. And if that's the long-term clean, firm solution, that's another reason why a near-term investment in natural gas would not be stranded, because you could repurpose much, if not all, of the infrastructure that you build out for that natural gas generation in the near term to burn this clean fuel. So we think the chance of these gas resources being stranded is very low. This does have an implication for natural gas delivery capability here. So we're showing that gas being burned on a design day, the coldest day of the year, is about twice as much in 2045 as it is today, even when throughout the year gas combustion is being reduced by 80% relative to today as we're meeting our carbon targets. And then last thing I wanted to show you was this need for new capability on the west side. So we have this 6-zone model. If we combine the Pacific Northwest, West, and Southwest zones to consider the entire I-5 corridor, we find that by 2035, you need new delivery capability on the west side. And by 2045, that capability that's needed grows to about 17 gigawatts. Now, our model is meeting that by building 9,000 megawatts, 9 gigawatts of cross cascades transmission, and 6,000 megawatts, 6 gigawatts of new west side generation. but it could be a different mix of that. That's just, one result of an economic optimization. But the key finding is that building electrification in particular adds a lot of demand where the people live. It's residential demand. So where the people are is where the growth will be the highest. That's on the west side of the Cascades. And that's going to be the region that's most difficult, most constrained in terms of land use, and the most difficult to get new delivery capability into. So I wanted to highlight that finding for you all as well. So that was where I was going to stop, and I would be happy to take any questions if there's time. Mary, anything you wanted to add before we do that?
No, that was great, Arnie. Thanks.
Well, my sincere thanks to both of you, and especially you, Mr. Olson, for zipping through a very dense, but I think ultimately helpful and clear presentation. And it made me feel better, Ms. Winkie, that after all the many times you've seen it, you're still learning. So that makes me feel a little better. But with that, let me turn this to council for comments or questions. I certainly would note too, including given our role here on the FSEC Council, that this is both two parts. One, more of absorb the information as a council, as well as a second part is to help, continue to use every channel we can to highlight key issues like this for the public. Not that we have necessarily a large audience here today, but appreciate your time and participation. So with that, let me turn this to Council Peterson.
Yes, thank you. In 2040, it's still showing a lithium ion battery as the battery. Is there desire in the model to, when it's significant, or is there significant market indicators to analyze longer duration batteries, like the 100-hour iron air battery being tested by Puget Sound Energy at 10 megawatts, the 30 gigawatt hour iron air battery being tested and implemented by the PSE equivalent in the upper Midwest, Xcel Energy. So these are 4.16 day batteries. Does that work its way into the model, or is it not at scale to be considered yet?
Yeah, thank you for the question. That's a great one. And we did have a whole section on emerging technologies, which I just kind of skipped over in the interest of time. So I apologize for that.
I'm sorry. I did see that slide, and that's what prompted my question. Thank you.
Yep. No, it's a great question.
If you remember which slide it is, Mr. Olson, I'm sure we can scroll to it.
I can. Yeah. Let me go back. Thank you for that prompt. Let me go back to that, because I think it was here is where we looked at how to achieve 100% clean energy. And here you do need emerging technologies, and really a variety of them. And we did look at that 100-hour storage as one potential solution. What I'll note is that the model didn't like it very much. And that's mostly because of the poor round trip efficiency. So those resources are only about 40 to 45% efficient round trip, which means that you need to build an awful lot of megawatts of resources to charge them with, because you lose, over half of the energy on a round trip basis. So when presented with that resource, maybe I'll also note that there is already a lot of even seasonal storage that's embedded in the Northwest system through the hydropower system. Other regions where they don't have that amount of weekly, and longer storage, these batteries are much more valuable. And so we find them, like in our studies in New England, for example. The combination of offshore wind with 100-hour batteries were pretty good, because you ended up with a lot of wind at times when that were inconvenient. So it was almost free. So you could use that to charge these 100-hour batteries with. In the Northwest, because we have a lot of that storage already embedded in our hydro system, this isn't adding as much capability that we don't already have. And so the model preferred either a baseload resource like nuclear that can provide a lot of energy. And I'll just point you to the all emerging tech case, which is the second one from the right. This is the least cost way to get to 100%. Here it's building 16 gigawatts of nuclear. It's building a lot less wind and solar. That nuclear displaces an awful lot of wind and solar, because it just makes a lot more energy than wind and solar do. And it's building 42 gigawatts of peakers, clean fuel peakers, because it still has that need for a lot of power during that big winter event when the wind's not blowing, the sun's not shining, and it's a low hydro year, and you don't have very much energy. So it really wants a combination of a base load and a peaking resource to complement the hydropower and the wind.
Excuse me. Thank you for that. Other comments or questions, councils? Councilor Barrick.
Thank you, and I'll add to the chorus of Mary and say I have also seen this presentation several times now. So Arnie and Mary, thank you for this, and learn something new every time I see it as well. I do wonder for purposes of our work at FSEC and citing resources, Arnie, you're pointing out here the potential and the need for resources at pace that we have not seen maybe ever, but certainly not in a very, very long time. Citing obviously is where the rubber hits the road, and that's what we're concerned with here. I recall there being some suggestions and some ideas on citing issues and some concern even on the natural gas side of citing. Anything you've learned along the way here, or anything you've seen from other parts of the country where you all do work where there's been proactive work on citing and stuff that we can learn from here in the Pacific Northwest to be ready for what looks to be some challenges ahead?
Yeah, thank you. Another great question. And I think there are some lessons. We've been involved with the agency called GoBiz in California, which has been attempting to sort of identify citing efficiencies, ways to streamline the citing processes without necessarily compromising the state's Environmental Quality Act. There are just duplication that can happen. There are, application processes that can be unnecessarily lengthy and burdensome. Just the level of staffing that's required. And ideally, a lot of the staffing, I know that there are state, budget issues, but ideally, a lot of the staffing would be paid for through application fees. So I don't know to what extent the application fees cover the staff, the cost of the staff at the citing council, but that is, to me, is a good way to fund the infrastructure that's necessary to process the applications. There are especially, in California in particular, the counties play a big role, and they just have been at different levels of sophistication and different levels of staffing as far as, the types of projects and the volume of projects that they've had to address. So Riverside County and San Bernardino County in particular, with a big presence in the Mojave Desert, have had a lot of solar siting experience, which they've been able to help other counties with that maybe are less used to that. So yeah, I think if you look in the report, there are some recommendations there for how to address that. But I think a lot of it is honestly probably just like, toning the muscles, having, getting reps, getting used to it, learning as you go and improving the process as you go through it. I will say, we interviewed developers about what they saw as the biggest barriers to building stuff in the Northwest, and every one of them identified citing as one of them, but very few of them said citing that they viewed citing as a fatal flaw or as something that they just couldn't get past. So they all said, yeah, we don't like it, it's a pain, it could be better. They all said we can get past it. So maybe that's some silver lining there.
Were there other questions or comments from council members? Well, let me just try and close this out perhaps with a quick one. And if it gets too cumbersome, Mr. Olson or Ms. Winke, we can defer it. But as I was thinking about this briefing, the question I had for you, especially given we're to be balancing of interests and opinions, usually analysis like this brings constructive criticism, if not critics. So my question is two-part. A, what do the critics say at a high level? And B, what would you like to say? What would you say about said criticism?
Well, I'll mention one. Mary might have another one, but I would say maybe the biggest point of interest or contention, maybe a word to use, is around the role of battery storage. I just think that finding is not, it's not what we or others see when we look at other regions. And so I think there's a lot of entities that are national entities that, might have expected storage to play a similar role in the Northwest as they've seen it, even in other winter peaking areas like PJM or MISO or the Northeast. And so the role of hydropower in both shaping the nature of the region's reliability needs, but also then impacting the role of battery storage is, I think, probably the most, it's probably contentious, but it's also it's hard, it's uncertain. Like how to model the hydro in the Northwest, it's so complex. It's cascading in nature, it's multinational. We have a lot of hydro storage, but we also have a lot of, spill and flushing of water down the river at inconvenient times. So it's just an enormously complex machine to get right. But in order to really understand how all of the other resources can contribute, you kind of do have to get the hydro modeling right, because there's one sense in which hydro can be used to store wind power. Existing hydro can be used to store wind power behind the reservoirs, and that enhances the value of wind and solar relative to what it would be without the hydro. But then if you get to the end of the hydro's flexibility and you need some additional capacity, there are probably cases in which batteries would help. And so I think that to me is probably the biggest question that the region faces and challenge it faces in understanding the nature of its resource adequacy needs and how resources can help to meet them.
Thank you.
I would add just one more if we have a minute. Sorry, Arnie.
Yeah.
The other thing that people like to poke at is the load forecast. And I think load forecasting is just very inherently challenging, and there's a lot of different opinions, but E3 took a pretty aggressive approach on the electrification assumptions. And I think the criticism that I hear relatively often is that, well, that's not realistic, or that's going to occur more slowly than kind of the energy strategies contemplate. So I think that's the other piece that I think is important to interrogate when kind of comparing similar analyses, is just looking at those load forecast assumptions.
Understood. Appreciate that.
I'll just note that I worry a little bit less about that one, because that one is self-correcting over time, right? Next time, as the utilities do their plans, they can see what load has actually showed up, and they're constantly refreshing their forecast of what will show up over the next 10 years. So does it change it changes the magnitude of what we're showing? I don't think it changes the nature of what we're showing. I think all the general lessons out of this are still the same.
Yeah.
Understood. Councilor Robert.
Well, Chair Beckett, I know we're getting close to time here. I did just want to put in a quick plug for some work that continues to go on at the UTC. For those interested in continuing this discussion and continuing an in-depth look at resource adequacy, we have our resource adequacy meeting next Monday, June 22nd. I'll put a note in the chat here with the agenda on there, and E3 and this team is also on that agenda. So we'll continue this discussion. It's obviously something we're looking at significantly here at the UTC as well. I will just add one thing, Arnie or Mary, if you want to respond to this. Another piece I do just want to make sure is that we put these numbers in context, and that is, right, 9 gigawatts or 14 gigawatts is a very big number. And it's under those circumstances where you sort of have the compounding issues of low water year, long stretches of cold weather, et cetera, where those numbers come into play. And so if I have a criticism, it's that we're sort of framing around that, and we're sort of backing into the fact that, yes, that's a big number, but obviously there are resource adequacy concerns on a spectrum, right? Like that is kind of like the worst case scenario, and we're working from a spectrum backwards from there. So I don't know if it's a criticism. I think this is how we think about resource adequacy. We kind of look at the worst case scenario and work ourselves backwards, but it's just important to me that we continue to put it into context of under these extreme circumstances, this is the issue, but under other circumstances, we continue to have a need to make sure that we are moving forward on building resources, is kind of the way I think about it. So just wanted to throw that out there as don't know if it's a criticism or contextualization, but it's one of those two things.
Appreciate the good comment. Mr. Olson or Ms. Winky, any closing comments from either of you or both of you?
I don't
Not for
think
me.
so.
I'll-
Just really appreciate the opportunity to present
Yeah.
to the council.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, and also that I know there's a lot of material here, and here's my email. If anyone wants to reach out, you're welcome to. We're also easy to find on the web, and we'll be there in person in Olympia on Monday, and happy to continue the conversation there.
Appreciate that.
And I'll put my email in the chat too, and I'm always happy to talk about resource adequacy.
Excellent. Well, I know you have an extended session, as Councilor Rivera and Chair Rivera noted, on Monday, so we'll look forward to that. Again, for any members of the public or other council members that have questions or comments, you are welcome to provide them to the FSEC Council at fsec@fsec.wa.gov. That is available to you literally at any day on issues. And with that, unless there are any hands of any other closing comments or issues I'm forgetting, I will soon gavel us out while people check to see if there's any closing. We will close this meeting, and I will open up the informational public hearing for Goose Prairie and Columbia Solar projects at 3:15 p.m. We'll take a quick break to transition, both as members as well as the technology. And with that, I thank you all, and this meeting is concluded at 3:06 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Beckett, for bringing the education side to this. Is very helpful.
Thanks for everyone's collective effort and willingness.
Yep.
See you.